almost. Okay. You're so, so sweet, right? Because you were like, he wants to save this prostitute from prostitution. He wants to save her soul. He wants to give her like, go out and change your life, right? Is that really the reason where he goes on this rant? Is that really the reason he gives her this like romantic, beautiful version of marriage and what it means to be a father to a daughter? I don't know. He admits he's being as truthful as he can be. He admits he wants power over her. He wants to dominate her. Do you see this, everybody? He wants to control her. It's the exercise of my power that attracted him. And then here, this is when he really starts putting on. What was the whole point about the father on page 55? Why does he go into such detail about this is how fathers are supposed to treat their daughters? They're supposed to worship them. I mean, it's almost creepy, right, George? I don't know about you, but I was a little creeped out when he was like, daughters are supposed to be jealous of their boyfriends, even like you know, fathers are want, you know, like they get on their knees and kiss their daughter's feet. I mean, he's really going overboard. What do you think he's doing right there?
So I just to add like a thought, like, so when they both like woke up and he was like a little bit more conscious and she was just kind of like staring at him, I think he felt bothered that he was being objectified by her, like using that sort of gaze.
Yes.
And he was like, whoa, 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 you're not going to objectify me. I'm going to objectify you. Like, he was like, I'm going to show you that I'm like the superior person here.
Yes. Yep.
So then he decided to go on that rant. That's why I think he decided to do that.
And why? Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And why bring up the father? Like, to me, he's fishing.
I think it's because like her family like kind of abandoned her, so he's making her feel even worse about herself.
Yes, he is fishing, Kyle. You know, he brings up families and he can tell. Ooh, let's look at the chat. Thank you, Wade. He can tell that, you know, he starts to fish a little bit. Like, a lot of women end up in your position because they're abandoned by their families. She doesn't say anything, but he can tell that she's really listening. And he's like, maybe it was the dad. So he starts to go on about the dad and the dad and the dad. Father should do this. Fathers, if I had a daughter, this is how I would love her. And on page 55, she says, this is what Liza says. Some are glad to sell their daughters rather than marrying them honorably. Why do you think Liza says that? Anybody?
Because that's what happened with her. That's what her father did to her.
Her father sold her into prostitution. Yep. Ouch. And the minute she says that, this is what he thinks. Aha. So that was it. Now he knows how to play her, right, George? Like, now that he knows what happened to her, then he could go into this is what marriage should be. This is how men should treat women, like they're goddesses, like put them on a pedestal. Does that make sense, everybody? That rosy picture of a woman, of a child nursing at her breast and rosy nipples and all that good stuff. Like, he really just lays it on her, that is the idyllic of a family. Obviously, she does not come from that kind of family, right? And a large part of it, again, I think you're absolutely right, Nick, that his goal is to, well, who knows what his goal is. Maybe we should be charitable. Maybe he really does want her to leave prostitution behind. What's really interesting to me is that as he's going on and on and on and on, that he starts to believe it himself. You see, the more he starts to talk about what true love should look like, the more he starts to kind of lay it on, the more that he himself starts to become convinced by his own romantic vision. Does that make sense, everybody? So at a certain point, for example, on page 59, this is towards the bottom of page 59. He says, and I worked myself up to such a pitch that I began to have a lump in my throat myself. And all at once I stopped, sat up in dismay, and bending over apprehensively began to listen with a beating heart. I had reason to be troubled. And why? Because Liza had totally broken down by this point. You know, he had gone on about how prostitution is going to lay her like totally useless, that she is going to be nothing more than this creature on the sidewalk begging for food and you know, sores all over, dying a slow death, probably from STDs. I mean, he's laying it on really thick, like this is where you're ending up. This idyllic form of love, forget it. It's not going to be for you. And then he says, I knew I was speaking stiffly, artificially, even bookishly, in fact. I could not speak except like a book. But that did not trouble me. I felt that I should be understood and that this was very bookishness might be of an assistance. But now, having attained my effect, I was suddenly panic-stricken because he had never seen such despair. I mean, it was working. He was trying to lay her low and it was working, right? But then he does something at this point, right? She is crying on the bed. She is totally distraught. She has been laid low by all of his words, his romantic vision, and then her ruinous future. And suddenly he says, Liza, my dear, I was wrong. Forgive me, my dear, I began. But she squeezed my hand in her fingers so tightly that I felt I was saying the wrong thing and stopped. This is my address, Liza. Come to me. Let's break this down. Why, at this moment, does he give this prostitute, Liza, his address? And why does he say to come to him? What's your guess? What has happened? Why give her his address? Later, he's like, oh my God, I hope she doesn't come, right? Like, I don't want this woman to come. But why in that moment does he give her the address?
I think
Maybe because his whole life he has kind of went through that same despair, and that like he's thinking that what if I had this help when I was young? So he's like, maybe I can help her become
good.
You know,
So,
I don't know.
yeah, Olivia, I don't think you're wrong that he was inspired in that moment to try to help this creature, right? That he felt genuine pity for Liza in that moment, that maybe he actually did want to help her. Elena, did you want to add on?
I was just gonna say that he thought like maybe he was the hero in that moment and could like she saw him as a hero.
Yes, beautiful. So we've been talking this whole time about how he wanted to control how she saw him. And through his rants and through what did he begin to do? You know, was this all planned out beforehand? No, he didn't plan on sleeping with a prostitute. You know, he didn't have this, he started to rant. He started to have this big sort of long soliloquy. And by the end, he had convinced her that he was a man who could love her and help her out of her prostitution. And he'd even perhaps convinced himself that he was a hero, that he could be a man good enough to save her. Does that make sense, everybody? Do you see what had happened? He got wrapped up in his own romantic vision of himself. He kind of got wrapped up in it. That's how persuasive he was. He persuaded her, but he also persuaded himself.
But he basically he also he basically had nothing to hold on to either. And so I felt like in this way he thought he could identify with something and be something other than this
Yes.
poor, you know,
Yes.
kind of a loser in a way.
Yes. In this moment, at this point, this woman is looking at him like he is a romantic hero out of one of his novels. Do you all see this? He hasn't been able to convince anybody else. You know, like his friends aren't convinced. He's not convinced. His servant's not convinced. Nobody sees this man as anything other than pathetic, right? Like not like a bug on the, not even worthy of like getting a slap in the face. Like, remember the officer? Wonk. You know what I mean? Like, so Nick, you're absolutely right. Here's a woman who is looking at him with eyes. And remember, you know, what reflective consciousness is, as, you know, Wade, you talked about this a little bit. Lacan talks about this, Sartre talks about this, that often when we are, when we say we're in love, or when we are looking into the eyes of a lover, and I know this sounds really dark, this is also like from Donne, one of my favorite poets, British poets of all times, that many of his poems are about how when we fall in love with somebody, what we're really falling in love with is the reflection of ourselves in our lover's eyes. We're falling in love with the way that they love us. You see what I'm talking about? Is it really them? I mean, I'm going to push back a little bit because, you know, all the times that I've fallen in love, honestly, I've sort of convinced myself in that moment that we have so much we share. Like, I found, you know, like my soulmate or whatever that word means, right? Like I found this person who's like me in so many ways, and look at how much we have in common. And I'm here to tell you, and I hope this doesn't freak you out, but the longer I'm married, the more I do not know my husband. And I know that sounds completely paradoxical. The longer I'm married, the less I know my husband, because so much of what I assumed was him was just me projecting my own fears, my own experiences, my own definitions of words. And the longer I'm married, the more I'm recognizing my husband as a totally separate subject who is a total mess on his own, right? Complex, deep, that again, at the beginning of a relationship, you're projecting so much of yourself. So what are you really falling in love with? Is it this other subject, or is it more the reflection of yourself in the subject's eyes? And so here, does he really want to save Liza because he's gotten to know Liza, because he sees her as a subject? Or does he want to be a hero in that moment because that's how she sees him? And nobody else has such a terrible view of him. And he wants desperately to be that man that's reflected in her eyes. Do we all see this, right? But the minute he leaves, he starts to regret that. Why? Why is he so regretful? Why is he so nervous and upset that she might come? And he's pacing back and forth. He's just absolutely beside himself. Why?
Because then his image of being a hero and being well off will disintegrate. He isn't that well off himself.
That's right. He has this dingy little apartment. You know, everybody at this point has a servant, and he can't even pay his. You know, he's got raggedy clothes. He's doesn't have like a good showering system. He's probably not really big in personal hygiene. I mean, like, you know, the guy is really a mess. And what he's anxious about is that she's going to come and see him as he really is. That he's not a hero, that he doesn't have it all together, that he's not better than she is, right? And that he's in no position to save her.
It's like
yeah, Nick, yeah.
It's like Shrek when Princess Fiona wakes up and is like, Prince Charming. It's this big old green dude.
I think that's more ironic when the actual Prince Charming in later movies went to the castle and there's just a wolf just laying there.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's funny how much of this is playing into more modern day fairy tales, not the original ones, but more contemporary ones. This idea of, with whom do you reveal your true selves? And if you do, what are the consequences? And, you know, romantic, good ending stories have it, oh, we love each other anyway. It's not quite how this ends. I'm so sorry. Okay. So I know. Remember that the day after too, what does he do to like try to make things up with his friends? He writes this like really long romantic letter, like, oh, I'm so sorry, it wasn't me, it was because I drank too much. I know, it's kind of a rude bastard. And he was like really proud of himself because again, he's trying to control that narrative. He's trying to come off as being something other than the pain in the butt that he was during that party. Yeah. So he's trying to reestablish some sort of sense of normalcy, get himself back to his quote unquote normal life, and Liza could ruin it all because she expects more of him. She sees him as more than he is. Okay, everybody, I know this was a confusing part. What happens when Liza does show up? Several days later, she shows up. First of all, what was he in the middle of when she shows up? Hey,
having a bout with his servant.
Yeah, he was having a stupid petty fight with his servant because he didn't want to have to pay him, and the servant was kind of being all grumpy about it, and it was not a good moment, right? Of all the moments that Liza could walk into his life, this was probably one of the worst. It does not put him in a good life. Huh? What's that?
All the gin joints.
Oh, shush. That's you. Do you want to see my husband? I told them you look like a Russian intellectual. He's got kind of crazy hair right now. He's got
Yeah, you can show him real quick. No harm in it.
Yeah, I'll have to go grab him at the end. Okay. So that, yeah, he really does look like he's got his U2 shirt on though, so maybe it'll ruin the image. So then, so right here, you know, she comes, she sees. Then, what does the underground? What is going on after that? That what does what with Liza? Does he try to pretend to be the hero? What happens?
I think he opens up to her and is like, look at who I am. Like, this is who I am. I wasn't doing anything for you. I was just trying to like, what do you call it? Charm myself, you know, like.
Yes, he admits the truth, Nick. He lets it all out. I mean, every single petty, terrible aspect of himself. I mean, he says it all. Here on page 70. He even says to her, "Why have you come? Answer, answer," I cried, hardly knowing what I was doing. "I'll tell you, my good girl, why you have come. You've come because I talked sentimental stuff to you then. So now you are soft as butter and longing for fine sentiments again. So you may as well know that I was laughing at you then, and I'm laughing at you now. Why are you shuddering? Yes, I was laughing at you. I'd been insulted just before at dinner by the fellows who came that evening before me. I came to you meaning to thrash one of them, an officer, but I didn't succeed. I didn't find him. I had to avenge the insult on someone to get back my own again. You turned up. I vented my spleen on you and laughed at you. I'd been humiliated, so I wanted to humiliate. I'd been treated like a rag, so I wanted to show you my power. That's what it was. And you imagine I'd come there on purpose to save you? Yes, you imagine that? You imagine that? Totally, brutally honest. Totally and brutally honest. You know, and I just for 1 second, I want us to imagine, have we ever been in that position before? Where we have felt humiliated, when we have felt put down, when we are having a bad day, and then we turn it around and make somebody else feel just as miserable as we are?
I feel like that's your stereotypical idea of what people nowadays call a bully. Like they feel bad about themselves, so they make themselves feel more powerful by putting someone else down.
Right. That's right. That's right. I mean, you can see it on the playground, any school, right? This is why men who have been berated by their bosses don't say anything to the boss and go home and berate their wives, right? I mean, this is, or other way around, wives are berated by their bosses and go home and berate their husbands. That this is just, you know, we feel humiliated, we see somebody else in a position where they have to take it. So usually it's somebody like, unfortunately for a lot of us, and let's just be honest, sometimes, you know, for many of us, that is the people we love the most because we know they will take it, right? So you can be cruel to your mom because you know she's gonna love you anyway. So if you're having a bad day, you can take it out on her. This is what my teenager is doing right now. Well, actually, she's kind of stopped it, thank God. She stopped, she's kind of worked it out herself, which is really, really nice. But for a while there, if she was having a bad day, it would just come all on me, you know? And why? Because she couldn't take it out on other people, but she needed to take it out on somebody, just like the underground man. He found somebody who was lower than he was and he could take it out, and he did. He even goes on, right? Bottom on 70 says, save you from what? Or perhaps I'm worse than you myself, right? Power is what I wanted. Sport was what I wanted. I wanted to wring out your tears, your humiliation, your hysteria. That was what I wanted then, you know? I hated you already because of the lies I had told you, because I only like playing with words, only dreaming. But do you know what I really want is that you should all go to hell. That's what I want. I want peace, yes. You know, he keeps going on page 71. I mean, this is a really long rant. Like he's exposing it all, right? Like, phew, here it is. He's exposing it. I posed as such a hero to you, and now you would see me in a wretched torn dressing gown, beggarly, lonesome. I told you just now that I was not ashamed of my poverty, so you may as well know that I am ashamed of it. I am more ashamed of it than of anything, more afraid of it than of being found out if I were a thief, because I'm as vain as though I had been skinned, and the very air blowing on me hurt. Surely by now you must realize that I shall never forgive you. I shall never forgive you for having found me in this wretched dressing gown. I shall never forgive you the tears I could not help shedding before you just now, like some silly woman put to shame. And for what I am confessing to you now, I shall never forgive you either. You must answer for all of it because he turned up like this. He goes on, right? He says all of this. What more do you want? He asks her. Why do you still stand there confronting me after all this? Why are you worrying me? Why don't you go? And then he says, at this moment, a strange thing happens. What happens, you all? How does she react to this torrent of information? This exposing of himself. Every single petty, violent, controlling, manipulative side of him. What does she do? It's on page 71. Do you guys remember?
Doesn't
that?
she embrace him?
Yeah.
Almost as if she pities him.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
she's like, wow, this guy's got some problems.
Yeah. I mean, I want to go back to Alexia the other day when Alexia said, being a true friend, and I think most of us would say this about true love, is seeing the worst in somebody, seeing exactly who they are, terrible mess and all, and loving them anyway, right, Alexia? Not loving them in spite of, loving all of them. The complex, messy, often disturbing, all of them. Does that make sense, everybody? That's what intersubjectivity is. You see a subject as a subject, not as a perfect version of them. You don't love them if only they could be the perfect version of themselves, right? You love them, you accept them, you embrace them. They're honest. And that's what she does. What does she show the underground man? She shows him love. She loves him. Anyway, this is what it says. But at this point, a strange thing happened. I was so accustomed to think and imagine everything from books and to picture everything in the world to myself, just as I made it up in my dreams beforehand, that I cannot all at once take in this strange circumstance. What happened was this. Liza, insulted and crushed by me, understood a great deal more than I imagined. She understood from all of this what a woman understands first of all, if she feels genuine love, that is, that I was myself unhappy. So Nick, you're absolutely right. She embraces him because she sees in him the level of unhappiness that she feels about herself. Do you see what I'm talking about, everybody? She recognizes in the underground man her own humiliation, her own darkness, her own insecurities. And she embraces him. And then what happens? This is such a sad part of the novel. So, so sad. Does anybody remember what happens next? It's okay if you get it wrong. I promise I won't judge you. I will love you, even all of your mistakes and messiness. It's a little hard to maybe catch because this is not explicit when it comes to sex, but on page 72. It was funny. He starts, so she embraces him. At this point, there was a revulsion in my heart too, like she suddenly leapt from her chair with an irresistible impulse and held out her hands, yearning towards me, though still timid and not daring to stir. At this point, there was a revulsion in my heart too. Then she suddenly rushed to me, threw her arms around me and burst into tears. I too could not restrain myself and sobbed as I'd never had before. And this is what he tells her, right? They won't let me, I can't be good. But then he starts to become aware of a faraway, involuntary, but irresistible feeling that it would be awkward now for me to raise my head and look Liza straight in the face. Why was I ashamed? I was ashamed. The thought, too, came into my overwrought brain that our parts now were completely changed, that she was now the heroine, while I was just a crushed and humiliated creature, as she had been before me that night, 4 days before. And he says, I was envious of her then. Why? Because she was a true hero. He had just been playing a part. She was the true hero. She saw his pain and his misery, and she embraced him. She embraced him. And this is when he grips her hands tightly, how he says, I hated her. A feeling of mastery and possession flamed up in his heart, right? And he did to her what perhaps some men throughout history have done in similar circumstances. It was almost like an act of vengeance. At first, there was a look of amazement, even of terror on her face, but only for one instant. She warmly and rapturously embraced me. So what we can assume there is that he had sex with her. Does that make sense, everybody? And that at first she was sort of terrified because it was like, whoa, what's going on? But then she embraced him back. That's really, really important because of what comes next. What's the next step? Is that he says this. This is on page 72. A quarter of an hour later, I was rushing up and down. I had insulted her finally. This time she understood it all. I had insulted her. There's no need to describe it. She realized that my outburst of passion had been simply revenge, a fresh humiliation, and that to my earlier almost causeless hatred was added now a personal hatred, born of envy. Though I do not maintain positively that she understood all this distinctly, but she certainly did fully understand that I was a despicable man, and what was worse, incapable of loving her, right? And then he starts to think, why am I incapable of loving? You know, and he says, I'd never in my life been able to imagine any other sort of love that other than tyrannizing, being a tyrant, tyrannizing another person and showing my moral superiority. To him, he could not in a loving situation be anything other than the dominant one, anything other than the one who's in control. He couldn't stand that she, this woman, could see him as anything other than the master. Does that make sense, everybody? It's sort of like Garcin. No exit. He couldn't stand that a woman wouldn't see him in a certain way, right? I mean, one, he very much wanted the good opinion of men. Usually women didn't mean much to him because they followed him around. He could abuse them and they would follow him around like sick little puppies, right? Estelle was willing. He was a man. She didn't care if he was a coward or not, right? She said so. I don't care. You got a chin, you got hands, you're a man. That's fine.
And
But
then
Inez
Inez
would
pointed
not.
out that she'd say he was God Almighty if he would give her attention.
That's right. That's right. But Inez, what does she say to him? I'm your gaze. I look at you. I can just look at you and I can call you a coward, and guess what? There's nothing you can do about it. I mean, it drove Garcin crazy, right? That this woman wouldn't see him as something that he wanted to be seen as. And the same thing with the underground man. Because for these men, love meant being superior to women. Love meant tyrannizing over women. Does that make sense, everybody? And she had the upper hand. She had seen him at his weakest. She had seen him vulnerable, and he couldn't stand that. So what does he do to her? What does he put in her hand as she's leaving? What is the final, totally humiliating blow that he gives her? Do you all remember? Breaks my heart.
I thought that it was like him paying her like she was a prostitute.
He gives her money. That's
Doesn't
right.
she throw it down on the desk though?
That's right. So, I mean, imagine that. A woman comes over, sees you, right? Sees this man and his vulnerability, has sex with him, probably for the first time in her life ever, where she is willingly having sex with a man because of what she hopes is love. And what does he do? He gives her money. Why would he do that? Why would he give her money?
Because he wouldn't save her, so it's the least he could do.
Maybe. I mean, some of you are like so sweet, like, well, she might have, I don't want her to starve. I think there's, I don't know. Do you
I
think
thought it was like his like last like act of revenge, just to put her down one more time so that she knew that no matter what, she was still lower than him.
That's right. I think the message is clearly, you're nothing but a prostitute. You will be nothing more than a prostitute, especially to me. So what we just did meant nothing. It was just another John. It was just another sex act, right? George, I think you're right. I think it was his last little dig at her. You thought this meant love? Just another night with a prostitute. Meant nothing. And that's why she leaves it behind. Her final act as a hero is to reject how he sees her, reject how he classified, that act between them. And it drives him crazy. He's like, damn it, she got it, she got me at the end, because that's by leaving that rubles, leaving that money, she was giving him the final, like, piss off, you can't, I'm rejecting that. This is when he gets into his last rant, that last rant. And I think I'm going to read it here, where he says, even now, so many years later, all this is somehow an evil, very evil memory. I have many evil memories now, but hadn't I better end my notes here? I believe I made a mistake in beginning to write them. Anyway, I felt ashamed all the time I've been writing this story. So it's hardly literature so much as corrective punishment. Some of you might have felt that way too, reading it, like, this was not literature, this was corrective punishment. Thanks a lot, Professor Qualls. Why? To tell long stories, showing how I've spoiled my life through morally rotting in my corner, through lack of fitting environment, through divorce from real life, and rankling spite in my underground world would certainly not be interesting. A novel needs a hero, and all the traits for an anti-hero are expressly gathered together here. And what matters most, it all produces an unpleasant impression. For we are all divorced from life. We are all cripples, every one of us, more or less. We are so divorced from life that we feel at once a sort of loathing for real life, and so cannot bear to be reminded of it. Why, we have come almost to looking upon real life as an effort, almost as hard work, and we're all privately agreed that it is better in books, or in social media, or in movies, or in video games. You all fill in the blank there, right? Real life takes too much effort. Real relationships take too much effort. Real romantic relationships take too much effort. It's easier to just swipe left. It's easier to maintain an image on Facebook. It's easier to have, right, this sort of romantic image of our lives instead of really kind of doing the hard work. And real life is kind of boring. Real life is kind of like drudgery. We'd rather have, read the books or watch the movies that show life to be exciting and on edge, and that our lives really matter and we can be heroic and rise to the occasion and triumph over evil. What does real life offer us? Like these petty little grievances that we have, right? Why do we make a lot of drama in our lives? So that they resemble more these sort of epic battles that we read about and watch movies about and watch cartoons about in terms of Shrek, right? He says this, he goes, why do we fuss and fume sometimes? Why are we perverse and ask for something else? We don't know what ourselves. It would be worse for us if our petulant prayers were answered. Come, try, give any one of us, for instance, a little more independence, untie our hands, widen the spheres of our activity, relax the control, and we, yes, I assure you, we should be begging to be under control again at once. What do you think he's trying to say there? What is he trying to say? And I know I have to let you all go. What do you think he's, and how does that fit in with free will? How does that fit in with his arguments about, that we're logical, sure, but we're so much more than that? What does this have to do with the tie between part one and his pathetic, really terrible choices he's made in his life? Anybody? Like, how did you wrap this all together? Or were you like, I don't know, it's just kind of a mess?
I think it was kind of like wait, can you hear me? Okay. I think it was a final statement to the Enlightenment thinkers. Like, he was like, give us a moment to actually show you that our free will is this great thing. Even though it has been disastrous in my life, it makes me who I am. And I'd rather be who I am than something like put on a facade for people and show them who I am not. Because all it has brought me is pain.
Yeah.
For instance, with Liza, like he tried to put on this facade and it brought him pain.
Think about when he tried to, Zarkev, or whichever the old not friend was, he tried to be relevant when he wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, what he's trying to say here is that we have, you know, we've tried to convince ourselves, and mostly through our art, that there is a sort of fate for our lives, that we have a certain path we're supposed to follow, that our lives matter, that there's a middle, beginning, and end, that by the end we will have conquered evil, that we will find true love and friendship, and that our lives matter so much that like gods are interested, right? Like gods will intercede for the love. I mean, like think about all the mythology, think about Greek and Roman mythology, think about the Bible, think about, you know, religious practices, right? Like we matter so much. Your lives matter so much. We're heroes of our own narrative. And I think this whole novel is trying to undo that. This whole novel is trying to say that is all an illusion. And it's a really safe illusion. And it's a really comforting illusion. But if we were really to stop, if we were really conscious of who we are on the inside, we really were honest about the motivations in our life, many of them would resemble on some level the motivations of the underground man. That what we call friendships is, for many of us, a way to kind of have in a person somebody who will confirm for us our narrative, right? And that love is about power and control. Can I get this person to do what I want? Can I subvert his will from my will? You know, and that this kind of grand illusions. And I think what the underground man is saying is that if we were given the opportunity of saying, your life doesn't have to follow a certain path. You're not heroic. You're just big sacks of messiness. Go have, you know, figure this out for yourselves. We would go, no, you know, give me the illusion back. Give me that idea that I'm fated and I matter. I want that. I'd rather have that illusion than the truth. I'd rather have the illusion than reality. Real life is just, it's not fun. It's not grand. And that's what he says down here, right? We don't even know what living means now, what it is and what is called. Leave us alone without books or movies or social media, and we shall be lost and in confusion at once. We shall not know what to join on to. We should know what to cling to, what to love and what to hate, what to respect and what to despise, right? Take away our social media, what would we like anymore? We wouldn't know. Our friends wouldn't be able to tell us what to like, right? We are oppressed at being people, people with a real individual body and blood. We are ashamed of it. We think it a disgrace and try to convince to be some sort of impossible generalized person. As Nick says, the underground man at the end of this is a total mess. But Nick, he is unique, is he not? He is himself, is he not? What does that mean? He is farthest away from some generalized hero of a person, but he is at least himself. And that for many of us, we are running away from the messiness that makes us unique and trying to become this sort of generalized perfect whatever, generalized perfect student, generalized perfect woman, generalized perfect son or man, generalized perfect sports player, generalized perfect drill, you know, sergeant, right, Laura? Like we're running towards being this general sort of perfect mathematical equation of what a person should be. We've done it so much that we are afraid of who we are. We are stillborn, is what he says. Think about that. Okay, so we can do something that's like, this is me, I'm a big mess, ha! Like, I'm not perfect. I don't want to be. Could you all do that for me, please? Take a picture of yourself doing it. No, don't do that. I might get in trouble. Okay. Good luck with Steinecker. Does anybody have any last minute questions, comments, concerns? Papers, tests, underground notes from underground? Oh, George is eating something. It looks really good. I'm hungry. Granola bar? I want a granola bar. All right. Okay. I will see you guys later. I hope that was enlightening, because I know for some of you it was like just such a jumbled mess at the end. I hope that was helpful.
It definitely sets a lot of details straight.
Good. Good. All right. Well, take care, everybody, and good luck, and stay healthy and sane as much as you can.
Bye.
Bye-bye.